All right. So, well, officially, aloha and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening in this webinar called Livestock Health After the Flood. We truly appreciate you guys taking the time to be here with us, given all the challenges and many of us are facing it right now following these recent flooding events. So, starting the webinar from 7 p.m. More or less an hour presentations for speakers and 15 to 30 minutes Q&A for anyone who has any specific questions. Uh, will include presentation. Yeah, for the presentations are for veterinary extension team, and the Q&A questions that you can put it in the chat at any point. Some just quick housekeeping notes. The webinar is recorded for everyone's understanding. Please keep your microphone muted during the presentations. And our team, Mel and I, we're going to be monitoring the chat, and we'll share the questions with the speakers at the end of the presentation. We're going to be sharing a survey to better understand the situation and the challenges that you are facing in the chat. So feel free to fill it up. It doesn't take too long, and the survey is anonymous. And then before we begin, I would like to acknowledge and thank our team for putting together this informational session in such a short notice. After hearing what was happening in the North Shore and in different islands with the flooding, animals, and challenges with water, feed, and various things. So we came together so quickly to provide support and resources to our livestock producers. So our goal today is to cover the basics, provide immediate guidance. If you have any specific questions related to your operation, don't hesitate to reach out, like email us or call us, and we're also available to schedule a farm visit as needed for the ones that are located in Oahu or Hawaii Island. Yeah, so I would like to recognize and introduce really quickly our project team is Melalani Oshiro, the Hawaii Island Associate Extension Agent from CITAR, Dr. Rajiv Mishra, Extension Veterinary from CITAR as well, Dr. Kayla Rykar, Livestock Production Professor in CITAR, Dr. Janelle Dani, Staff Veterinarian, UH Manoa, Dr. Gabrielle Asai, Veterinarian from Paniolo Livestock Services, and Dr. Raquel Wong in the Hawaii Department of Agriculture and Biosecurity. So yeah, Melly, can you share the slides, please, if you have it available with you?
1 second and I'll get it up.
Yeah, thank you.
Can you guys see that?
Mm-hmm. Perfect.
Okay.
Awesome.
Charlie's on it.
Okay, and I'll hand it to you, Melly.
It's starting right now.
Yeah, thank you, Yoon, for that introduction. And I just want to say prayers to everyone who is really dealing with all the impacts from the flood and challenges that are out there. And feel free to reach out. I mean, to us, we may not have all the answers, but we do have a good network of support personnel that we do work with. So trying to reach out and find those resources for you folks and connect you with someone that can help. So all our contact, there you go. Our contact information from everyone that's on the project team that helped put this together will be shared. So we just want to give a quick introduction sort of on some of the topics that we're covering today and just talking about different things about feed and water sources, what you can do to keep it clean and safe for your livestock, and different things you can do to look at your animals and triage them and identify certain things that are early disease detection in them and providing that support for them and understanding sort of what the stressed animal would look like, especially when we're talking about some of the younger animals and this younger livestock that may be impacted by the water and the floods and everything else that comes along with it, and all the different health issues that we may be seeing or to be seen in the next few days or weeks coming after the flood event. Other things to consider as well as far as disposal for carcasses and everything after that, and also some updates on some of the assistance programs that are available to you folks out there. So I am going to hand this over now to Dr. Mishra, who is our extension veterinarian for CTAR. And you can just tell me to advance and I can push your slides or give it to you.
Yeah. So thank you. Hi, aloha mai kaka. I'm Dr. Rajiv Mishra, and as Mele introduced, I'm extension veterinarian with CTAR. And so I'm going to talk about, we all going to talk about something related to the flood based on whatever feedback we received so far and whatever we have seen so far. So anytime some crisis happens or there is a calamities, 24 hours before and next 2 days after the crisis happens, it's always first the crisis and then the coordination. So the first is we have to make sure we are all safe, we are going through the crisis. But once the disaster is gone, then we have to coordinate to make sure everything is fine. So whenever we have to go through this process, the first thing we have to make sure we as a livestock producer, the personnel that is involved on our activities, all are safe as well as our family members. Once we are sure all our family members are safe, then we need to triage our asset, which means our facilities, our equipment, our housing or the animal or livestock housing complex. We have to make sure everything is fine. As it is our own asset, we know what was recently built, what was damaged, and what was just there for a formality. So we know what is going to sustain the disaster, what is going to get damaged, and what we should avoid going first. So the first, we should make sure whatever structures are there are safe to go inside so that it's safe for the animals and all of those. And if anything that was recently built, or if you think anything was damaged because of this disaster or the flood, take a photo, because record keeping is the must. Because if you're going to file for insurance, or if the federal government is going to release some funding for the help, they need all those proofs. So you have to make sure you have the photos and you have all the, if suppose you are transporting your livestock to one farm, from your farm to your friends and all the gas bill, all the time you drove, all those bills should be with you so that you're gonna claim for the insurance. Then the logistic, if suppose everything is fine, now you need to order the feed, you need to order the water, or you need to order the bedding and all, just make sure you have some safe space to store them in, maybe on higher ground, where if that's going to flood again, it might not get spoiled or it might not get damaged. So always make sure you have all those things before you can do that, go for next step. So just, yeah. So the first thing, once you are done with the triage of the personnel, the structure or the housing complex, the next thing is performing a triage on the livestock or the animals you have. Some of you might have a single species, some of you have a mixed species. So now you need to perform triage on them. Don't spend a lot of time, because time is more crucial and you have to be as quick as possible so that everything remains safe. So the first thing you need to do is the visual inspection. You just go around, drive around all your animals. If you can, just walk around, make sure you are safe. And if you see any one of them visually bright, they are in herd, they are eating or looks bright, once they see you, they seems excited, it means everything is fine. After that, you need to make sure you know the A, B, and C of the triage. A means airway. Just make sure they are breathing fine. It doesn't look they are panting, or they doesn't seem bloated, or they doesn't seem breathing through the mouth. Just make sure they have a really, if somebody looks like they doesn't look bright and alert, then just make sure they have the normal body temperature. If they doesn't have it, they might have hypothermia. Just make sure of that. Make sure they have a, like, no, their extremities is not cold, like circulation and all. So if you, based on your observation, just grade them as a green, yellow, and the red light. So the green, the animal that are on the green categories are one, those ears are up. They're, if you have a goat, cattle, and sheep, they might be like ruminating. It means they are bright. If they are with the herd and walking along with other animal, it means they are good. You doesn't need to worry about them. Now you need to figure out the one, those are in yellow category. Like if somebody have low temperature, or if somebody that seems a little bit injured but is still eating and all, so those are the one on yellow category. Then you need to find out somebody, those are in the red category. But how are you going to grade them? So you're going to grade them if suppose somebody is unable to stand. If suppose you have a cattle who is lying down, severely bloated, those are on the red categories. Or if you see some animal that is circling around, that means the animal is showing you neurological signs. So those are on the red category. So if you look at on this picture here, if you look at this pig, everything is muddy here, but he is enjoying. We were in the farm, he was enjoying, he was running around everybody, he was asking everybody to pet him. So this is on the green category. If you look at this donkey, you will find out he have some injury. We are doing some dressing. We put on a bandage. They were eating and drinking. Everything was fine. So this is the yellow category. If you look at this recently, this baby goat, they had a little bit of hypothermia. So we just moved it into a warm place and all. So even though this is in yellow category, since they are babies, they can easily go to the red category if we are not going to take care of it. So these are the steps we need to perform for triaging the animal so that we can make sure whoever needs the care, we are giving more care to those who needs it. But if suppose we cannot fix those problems, so let's not waste the time. Let not the animal suffer it. You can choose for human euthanasia, and those options are always there. Yeah, next. Okay. So after you are done with the triaging, the facilities, triaging the animal, the most important thing you need is the water. Water is life. We all know that. Without water, we cannot survive. So the first thing, if you have a small livestock and you usually use the municipally, the supply water, if it's intact, that's good. But if you use the water from the reservoir or a dam or maybe a small, so always consider those as a contaminated whenever there is a flood. It's always get contaminated. And the most common contamination is the E. coli. And how you going to find out whether it's contaminated or not? So there are just two. Use the sense of smell and the sense of vision. Take the water in a clear glass, and if you can read any paper away from opposite side, it means the water is clear. If the water is clear, make sure it doesn't stink. If it's stink, it means it's not clean. But if it's dirty, then let it stand for 30 minutes. And once you're going to let it stand, all those particles is going to settle down. And once the particles settle down, then you're going to go to the next step. Yeah. So the next step is filtration. To filter, you doesn't need anything else. You can use the coffee filter, you must have it, or you can use the paper towel that you have it, or you can use a clean and clear cotton as well as nylon cloth. All they're gonna work in a similar way. So once you're gonna filter it up, you're gonna get a visually clear water. Then you have two options. If you have an electricity supply or if you have a gas supply, boil the water. If you want to boil it, make sure you boil it for minimum 1 to 3 minutes. After that, let it get cool down, and then you can offer it to all the animals. If suppose there is no electricity supply, because we are all electrified right now, only few of us have gas stove so that we can boil it. And if it doesn't have electricity, make sure you have some bleach and use the bleach to sanitize the water. Before you use bleach, just make sure there is not any suspended particles. So you have to filter it, and then only you need to add the bleach. Which bleach to use, I'm going to tell you in the next slide. Yeah. So these are the list of the bleach that have been approved by the government of Maine. And so you can see the name, their concentration, and what is the EPA number. Whenever you are using any bleach to clean the water, make sure they only have the sodium hypochlorite. That doesn't have any other ingredient as a major ingredient. They should be registered with EPA, and it should not be the one that have a really good fragrance. It should be descented. So here are some of the list. And so usually this is the bleach I'm going to recommend you. It's easily available in Safeway, Longstrex, everywhere. And if you look at the ingredient, it have 7.5% sodium hypochlorite. So it's going to give you around 7.1% of chlorine. And so if you are just doing like a quarter liter, just add 2 drops based on that. But if the water is dirty, then you can make it double the dose. Like if for a gallon, you can use around 10 drops. For 5 gallon, use around half teaspoon and use this concentration to fix it. And after that, wait for 30 minutes. make sure once you, after 30 minutes, you go near to the water, you're gonna smell the chloride smell. If that's coming, that's fine. If you doesn't feel any odor of chloride, you can add one more dose of the bleach, wait for 30 minutes, and we are good. You can offer those water to the livestock you have. Next one. Yeah. Now let's suppose it doesn't even have a bleach. Then the next option we have is the use of iodine. We can use it for 1 or 2 doses, but it should not be used for a long term because it might have some side effects. So doesn't use it for long term, because since we are associated with livestock, we all have some iodine in our cabinet, either for our use or for the livestock use to just clean their own. So make sure you have 2% iodine. It can be the tincture iodine or it can be a normal iodine. And you can use it like 5 drops in a quarter of thing. And then if the water is dirty, make sure it's a 10 drop and mix it, let it be there for around 30 minutes. And then you can use this water to offer all the livestock, but make sure this is not for the long-term use. You can use it for 1 or 2 rounds, but after that, either you have to go for the bleach or something else, but make sure you doesn't use it for long-term. And the most common iodine you're gonna use are in the image here. Let's go next one. Next slide. Yeah. So these two are, so providone. So go back a little bit. Yeah. So providone iodine is the one you can use it, but if you have a tincture, you can use it. The only problem with tincture, it also have alcohol, but since we are not using it a lot, so we might not see any side effect. And since we are only using 1 or 2 doses, it will be fine. So you can use any of those iodine available in the market. Yeah, the next one. Yeah. So once we are done with the water, now we need to make sure we have enough feed, or we are triaging the feed. If you already have some feed that got wet under the flood, you are not supposed to use it because it's not healthy and it's going to create more problem than it looks like. Other than that, if suppose some feed that did not directly came in contact with the flooded water, but it got wet because of the rain and the moisture and all, just make sure to take the internal temperature of that pile, because if it have temperature more than around 70 or 80 degree Fahrenheit, it might be a fire hazard. So make sure you just remove it from the house. Then you have to make sure the feed doesn't have a mold. Usually mold start growing within 24 to 48 hours. So if somebody forget to cover the feed, or if there are mold, you are not supposed to use it because it's going to cause more harm than good. Yeah, the next slide. Yeah. Why we should not use the grass or the fodder from the flooded area? Because of the silt. So basically silt is a small dust or the sand or the soil that comes along with the flood. And once the flood goes away, it covers all the pastures. And it's not just the sand, it brings the bacteria, it brings the parasites, and it brings all sorts of things with it. And the major pathogen that we usually see are the Clostridium, which can cause blackleg, botulinum, and tetanus. The another disease outbreak we usually see quite common with the flooding conditions are Listeria. Those are the two reasons. The silt also diluted the nutrient, because when a livestock is eating a grass, it's not just the grass, it's mixed with the silt. So it's going to reduce the absorption. And when they're going to chew those grass, it's not going to feel palatable because it's going to irritate the mouth. So these are the problem with the silt. So what are the other problems seen with the slits are cattle can have ruminal obstruction, they can have bloat, or they can have severe acids in the stomach. Sheep and goat can get listeriosis. Pigs can have salmonella and parasites. Poultry can have respiratory stress or botulinum. We're going to talk about all of it in a small. Equine can have colic as well as some skin irritation and some fly stripe. So yeah. So how to manage this slit problem? So the first thing is the pathogen problem. So how are we going to manage it? Once the flood is gone, we have to wait for a fresh rain, because if the rain is going to come back, it's going to clean all those grasses. But just don't rely on the rain because it might not clear all of it. And if suppose you want to be more careful about the pathogen problem, mow the lawn up to 4 inch of height and leave it as such as long as it doesn't grow up to 12 inch. Or if it grows 1 feet after you have already removed it, then it's the perfect condition and it reduces the chances of any pathogenic outbreak. For nutrition dilution, try to take those fodder and mix equal amount or slightly more amount of the fresh fodder you just purchased it from the store, or you just got it from your friend. Mixing it reduces the amount of silt in the food, so it's going to make the nutrient more absorbable, and it's also going to make it more palatable. So that's how we can manage this silt problem. Let's just think a silt as a like sandpaper. So you know how rough the sandpaper is. So whenever a cattle is eating a silt, it's usually gonna go inside and irritate all the GI tract. And when they irritate the GI tract, it's not gonna cause a problem. It's also causing a pore for the bacterial infestation, and that's gonna cause the problem more harsh. So what you can do to get rid of these things, even in the muddy area, you can put all the fresh fodder in a bucket, or you can put it on an elevated platform, and it will be easy for them to consume without being silt a problem. Yeah. Next. Yeah. Now, this next two slide is going to be specifically focused on the pig producers, because again, most of the Hawaiian pig producer focus more on slop because of the feed cost and all. So if you got the slop that was not used, but because of the flooding or any of these disaster was stayed outside, or was outside, then it might get fermented. Don't use the fermented slop. Why? Because fermentation created formation of alcohol. And if it stayed outside for a long time, it might have some fungus infection. So that can be more dangerous and can cause alcohol toxicity in case of pigs, and they are really sensitive to it. Then don't try to feed the slop in the mud, because at first those slop was, if you're going to put it on the mud, then they're going to get the slit. Along with the flood brings a lot of bacteria with it, a lot of parasites. They can bring rat lungworm. So all these things is going to be a problem. So mud feeding after a flood is a death sentence to your profit. All the animal is going to underperform. So it's going to be a huge dent on your economic feasibility. And so the next problem we're going to see it with the Korean natural farming system. We know a few of the producer they have their own standard KNF piggeries. So the heart and soul of KNF piggeries are the top two layer, the living layer and the brown carbon layer. So whenever there is a flooding, there is excess water which goes in and damages both the layer. And since they have a limited capacity of absorb those moisture, they might get wet or they might get hypersaturated. Or if the flood water have E. coli and all other bacteria, they might contaminate it. So just adding another layer is not an option. The best option is to remove half of the top layer, fill it with another layer of wood shavings. Like maybe if initially it was a foot long, maybe remove half, like 6 inch of the wood shaving, add new 6 inch of wood shaving. Then you need to add a new batch of IMO4 or microbial activity organism. These things should be done. But if suppose you have a KNF piggeries, after flooding you went inside and you feel like it's a rotten egg, it smells like, it means they have sulfur. So be careful, wear a proper mask, make sure it's well ventilated, try to remove those shavings and then replace it with the new one. And then you can get your original KNF bedding back to yourself. Next. Yeah. So these are the standard recommendation which is required for the survival of different livestock species at different stages of their production. So if you have a dairy cow which is giving milk or at a peak lactation, that cow should minimum receive 20 pounds of hay in a day and 7.5 gallons of water in winter, and in summer around 9 gallons of water. If you have enough space, they should receive minimum around 30 square feet for 20 cows. Like if you have a 20 cow herd, then each should have around 30 square feet. If you doesn't have enough space, make sure the space you have provided them have enough ventilation. So if you have a big space, ventilation can be compromised. But if you have a small space, you should not compromise with ventilation because it's gonna cause more respiratory issues. Similarly, we have for weaning calves, we have for beef calves and all of them, but everything is based on their production performance. Let's go to next one. Yeah, so similarly, we have for the broiler chickens, we have for the layer hen, we have pig, and we have the like lambs, sheep, and goats. So we can follow all of these. Maybe might not offer all of these, but we have to make sure we are taking care of as much as we can. Yeah, next one. Yeah. So let's talk about the pathogen. So listeriosis, it's one of the most common bacterial infection you're gonna see specifically in the flooded area. Why? Because of the silt, and it's listeria is always associated with the dirty fodder or maybe like damaged like silage, and also the most common clinical sign you're gonna see is head tilt. Their head will be tilted, or if you are not sure what a head tilt look like, one of the ear will be slightly above the another, so that's the best way. And the another clinical sign you're going to see is like head pressing. They will go in the corner and put their head on a wall and they will not move. And then you're going to see a circling clinical sign. If you're going to see any of these clinical signs in your sheep, goat, and cattle, think about listeriosis, call your local veterinarian and ask him to examine your animals, and make sure the sheep or the goat that is showing the sign of listeriosis is isolated and all other are at different place. Yeah. Now, Clostridium botulinum is one of the most common issue we usually see after flooding. And I think in Hawaii, botulinum is also one of the #1 reason of the death in the backyard poultry or feral chickens. So, but whenever there is the incidence of flooding, it's going to increase. But how are you gonna suspect your birds have a botulinum? So think about botulinum as a flaccid paralysis. Like you are unable to, like flaccid means you are unable to close your fist, or if you are unable to move your hand, you're gonna see those clinical signs. Like they are unable to lift their head. If you're gonna lift their head, it's gonna fall as if it doesn't have a control over it. Other than the Clostridium botulinum, make sure the feed you're going to offer your poultry birds doesn't have any mold or doesn't have any fungus, because it can damage the liver and it can damage their production performance and can kill more birds than any other reason after the flooding. Yeah, similar goes for the swine. So the most common problem after flooding you notice in a swine production facilities are salmonellosis, hypothermia, and aflatoxicosis. So salmonella, usually it's going to show severe clinical sign like bloody diarrhea, and they will have some purplish ear. For aflatoxicosis, it damages the liver, so you might see they are being more icteric or pale. And for hypothermia, just try to make sure you just provide them the warm bedding with some source of heat and all. And the main source of aflatoxicosis in case of pigs are the fungus on the feed. Next one. Yeah. So everything is happening. So what you should focus about, whether you should give the energy requirement of your livestock or you should focus more on the protein. So since we are still under disaster, focus on the energy, because energy is going to make them survive. And with those energy, they can go around 2 to 3 days with the low production. But once after a few days, once you're going to restart giving all the normal food with the protein and energy and all, they're going to go back to the normal production level. So at the time of disaster or flooding, you should focus more on the energy requirement than the protein requirement. So for cattle or sheep and goat, offer them more like the stem of a corn. That's the perfect fiber for them. Although that's not good enough for the production, but we want them to survive, so that we're gonna take care of all other things. For pigs and all, if you have a slope, you recently collected it, boil it or steam it to a certain temperature, then put it on a clean bucket and offer it to your pigs. For the poultry, the same thing. Get a fresh feed, mix it with the water, offer it to them so that you doesn't have to offer feed and water as separate. So these are the way to do it. But make sure you doesn't give the cattle feed to sheep and goat, because The cattle feed usually have slightly more concentration of copper, so it might cause toxicity. Yeah. So emotions. So after everything, so livestock is our life. Like we are doing either it as a passion or as a income of a family. So whenever we least lost those things, we have to be emotionally strong. We have to look for resources from where we can get more information, what to do next, how to get the compensated and all. So always try to talk to family, neighbor, friends, or extension agents. You can call to FEMA, Human Society, Red Cross, or Agri Stress has like helpline. Talk to them what to be done next, how you can get compensated for your loss, and all those things. So there are a lot of resources. We just need to find out the right place and right person to talk. Yeah, and we should always learn from the past experiences. Like one of the producer called me and told me, like, usually if suppose in this flooding season, if suppose your farm have 2 feet of water, make sure the electricity outlets are at 4 feet, because if electricity is damaged, then you have to make sure, because that's going to cost you most. If suppose electricity is there, it might cause electrocution. So always make sure the electric supplies are at minimum 4 feet of the farm height. That's going to save a lot of things. Make sure the feed and water are above the level of water that you recently saw it. Make sure at your farm you have a high-rise places where for emergency, where you can have like 7 days supplies of feed, 7 days supply of water, like maybe a bottle of bleach, a bottle of iodine, some fly repellent, some mineral supplements, all of them. So we need always to learn from our past experience so that we can always be prepared for the future. We can help our neighbor, our friends and family. Yeah. Next. Yeah. So thank you. That was my part. And we're going to talk about question by end, correct?
Yes, we can
Okay.
do that.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I think we're going to pass it over to, is it Dr. Gabby?
Dr. Gabby. Yeah.
Yep.
Mhm.
All right, thank you, Dr. Mishra. So we're going to go over just some things to expect. They're a little bit less immediate after the flood, but will be something that you need to have on your watch list. And I'm going to include a little bit of pre-storm preparedness and then post-storm management if we can. So we can move on to the next slide. All right, so before any type of storm or severe weather, there are some things that you can try to prepare with your own livestock. And one of them is trying to make sure that as many animals, if not all of them, are ID'd. And this can be done with tattoos. It can be done with branding. You can have ear tags. Obviously, ear tags can rip off, but at least it is something. And oftentimes they are a nice permanent form of identification. And you can have your farm information on those tags as well. So if those animals go missing during the disaster, they have a much better chance of finding their way back to the farm themselves. Keeping animals up to date on their vaccines, especially our ruminants and our swine. For ruminants, we usually want to do 7 or 8 way or Clostridium, tetanus, leptospirosis. Swine, we definitely want to keep up with some of our other leptospirosis and then some of our other bacterial pathogens as well. You always want to check the facilities and fencing structure around the housing and metal boards. Again, the electrical items, as Dr. Mishra said, are much bigger risk than I think people give them credit for. When things get wet, if that's still on, you can electrocute more than what you think you can. And then also when we know we're going to have winds, heavy rain, things like that, depending on the type of fencing and boards, you want to make sure that they're very secured so that they're not flying off and becoming a potential hazard where they could impale an animal or something like that along the way. It's very important to not, if you have a barn and you know it's going to be bad weather, you actually do not want to lock your animals inside those shelters during the storm. If the storms are severe enough to damage the shelters and the animals are stuck in them or flood the shelters, then it's pretty much an automatic death sentence. So we actually want those animals to have the ability to be able to run out. We obviously want them to have access to the shelter and have it as fortified as possible, but you don't want them actually locked in there. And then if possible, as Dr. Mishra said, prepare with extra water, fresh supplies, things like that, so that you have it as you're going forward. So those are some pre-storm things that you can prepare. And then Ideally have a backup plan. You know, some farms are on different levels of soil, so you might actually be able to move some of the animals from the lower levels up to the higher levels within the property to keep them a little bit drier or a little bit safer. If you know it's going to be really severe and potentially evacuation orders, and you have the ability to transport animals off property or nearby to another facility that's a little bit better footing than yours is, then that is a possible. One of the things with using neighboring farms and facilities with that is that your animals might have diseases, their animals might have diseases, and then you're commingling them together in a very stressful situation. And so it becomes a question of a biosecurity risk and if that's actually a good decision or not. So ideally, you want to do as much as you can to keep them on your farm and fortify your property. But in terrible situations, sometimes you do have to move them off just to keep them alive. But just be aware that ideally, if they are on a different farm, you don't actually want to just open the gates and have them in with those other animals. You want to preferably have them in a different pasture or field, so they're at least a little bit walled off from that. In some areas where you can have rapid storms that come in very quickly, this is a common thing in Colorado. Their fire hazards will come in so fast that they can wipe out a town in 15 minutes or so. And you'll actually see farmers going out there when the fires get close, and they actually just cut all the fences, let the animals run. Some of the horses are running out of the pastures with phone numbers spray painted on their sides. That's obviously a last-ditch effort. You really want to try to avoid that situation. We had a couple of farmers during this storm that called me and they said the floods are going too fast. How are we going to get them out? And I said, well, if you can't get them out, you got to just let them run. And all of those animals have actually gone back to those farms at this point now that the floodwaters have gone down. And so, you know, a lot of your animals that's home, and they might not just be gone forever. As soon as that weather clears up, they might actually come back. So, but having them ID'd is a very important factor in trying to get them back to the farm afterwards. Bless you. Aftermath of severe weather, so escape injuries or just injuries from the storm and things like that can happen. We definitely see a lot of those. Contaminated feed and water, Dr. Mishra covered that very, very thoroughly. Parasites, fly strike, hoof rot, pneumonia, premature birth, lost animals. And then as always, a note, whenever you're looking for lost animals or going back out onto your property, or anyone else's in a disaster area, your safety is the most important. You have to be careful about where you're walking, pay attention to things. Soil has shifted a lot. And so make sure that your footing and everything around you is actually a safe situation. You don't want to get stuck in a landslide or something like that. We can move on. All right, so feed and injuries. So if you have injuries that are a wound, the best situation is you just kind of want to flush them and clean them as best as you possibly can. Usually you want to flush and clean them and remove the actual physical debris and dirts that's in that wound. I usually like to use a 2% chlorohex solution or a diluted iodine. Oftentimes, most of you have iodine available, either Providine or the tincture. What I usually do with it is I say make a dilute tea color with that, and that is typically what I would be flushing a wound with for iodine. Chlorohex is available as well, and I would still probably dilute it out a little bit, but it seems to be a little bit harder to come by over the counter. And then you want to remove any hair, wool, particles that might be actually embedded in the wound. If you have a foreign object in that wound, you know, like a pole or an impaled thing, that's a veterinary call. Don't go pulling that out. Just leave it and flush around it, and then get somebody out there and notify. Clean daily until medical care. If you can't get medical care out there, just to keep that wound. If they're not vaccinated, they end up getting a really high risk for tetanus and blackleg and other diseases, just simply because that is now an open source for infection with muddy ground and bacteria around. Keep feed sources nice and dry. And I usually tell owners, if you can't keep them away from the animals, because if some of the animals haven't eaten in 24, 48 hours and they're really stressed, and you actually have them in an area where they might have access to that feed, I've had them get into it and then bloat and die because they were just so hungry and panicked from everything. So ideally store your feed separate from where your animals actually live. And I think that's just a good practice in general from a cleanliness standpoint. Clean fresh water sources. And then just a note, we do have some low-lying areas that potentially have some salty or brackish water. And this can become a concern for salt toxicity if the animals end up drinking that instead of the fresh water. And some of them will go a little bit too ham on salt blocks. So I usually remove those during these time periods if you still have them around as well. But those are the big things. If you have really large puddles because of the silt, because of the concern, you can consider attempting to treat the puddles with some of the things that Dr. Mishra had talked about, but really just trying to get those animals to a dry area, and then drinking out of freshwater sources is going to be your best bet. All right, we can move. So what I expect to see after this, because we're so muddy and so wet with everything, is we're probably going to have some foot rot cases. You really want to try to get these animals to dry bedding, dry pastures as soon as you can. But foot rot is likely something that we will see more of. The animals usually end up being limping, and that's typically the first sign. Sometimes you will see swelling or pain around the coronary band of the foot. And then redness is a common one with that. It is bacterial based, so it is spreadable. So if you're managing it yourself, wear some gloves for your own protection with everything. And also just keep in mind that because it's that, you could start off with one animal and then you could have 20 in the course of a week. Up here in the right-hand corner, there's a little foot that's cut in half, and it actually shows the coffin joint full of pus and fibrin, and that's actually where the infection is sitting in, which is why we see it pop up at the coronary band right there with all that inflammation. It's incredibly painful. You have really a lot of weight from these animals down on teeny tiny little digits, and that can cause a lot of pain and uncomfortable with it. For sheep and goats and cattle, you usually want to try to treat that, if you can, topically, interdigitally between the toes. If you can, you want to get that mud out and everything that is sticking between the toes so that it's nice and dry. I like to use a zinc sulfate or copper sulfate products. I think the zinc ones work a little bit better. They tend to be a little bit harder to find. You can also have rot just within the bottom of the hoof themselves. And then when you get to the point where any of the animals look like these photos, at that point you need some antibiotics. It's a little bit more severe. I've certainly had foot rot cases where the maggots have decided that is the best place for them to live. And it gets really gross and really quite gnarly. And those animals, you got to try to catch them as quick as you can. The life cycle on flies and maggots is faster than I think we all want to give it credit for. So it doesn't take long for them to make a home there. And then fly strike. We definitely see this in horses and sheep, probably the most in sheep, honestly. Wet wool, diarrhea, soiled wool is definitely the big predisposing factor for all of this. And you want to shear and clip the animals as best you can. If you do not have access to shears, I hate to say it, physically rip that wool out so that those animals can dry. And then you want to just remove as much soiled particles as possible. Ideally, isolate those animals away from the rest of the herd if you can, and then use a good antiseptic to actually clean and get all of that off. If you do have products such as Catron available to you, then you can spray it directly on the wound and kill the maggots. There's a misnomer that maggots will only go after dead tissue and soiled tissue. That's not true. When they get done with it, they'll start going for the live stuff. So I've actually had some wounds that have been far deeper than we give them credit for and had exposed muscle. So you really do need to be proactive if you see anything like that. And I think the biggest thing is prevention. If you have an animal with wet wool consistently, just go ahead and shear them. All right. Pneumonia. I do expect that we're probably going to see pneumonia. We have wet weather. The animals are super stressed. They're probably having a cluster closer together, or potentially herds that got moved together. And so we're going to very likely see more of this with the close quarters. It can be both bacterial and viral. Oftentimes bacteria and viruses like to make friends, best friends, in fact. So sometimes you'll have one, but oftentimes you have both at the same time. And all of these things with the close quarters, the stress, the wetness, we've got that all going on right there. So it just increases the risk of them getting pneumonia. All animals, you're going to see a decrease in energy levels. So you're going to see lethargy, a decrease in appetite. Oftentimes you'll have some labored breathing where you can actually visibly see their chest expand and contract, and they've got to work at it to breathe. You do see nasal discharge, but that's not the only sign for it. And then most of these animals have pretty significant fevers to boot with all of it. And so it's not just one small thing like a nasal discharge. It's usually their whole body is pretty affected from it. I think a lot of times this gets confused with nasal bots. We do see a lot of nasal bots in the sheep population. It's kind of just the cycle of the flies, and that tends to happen pretty regularly. most of the time, nasal bots are not something that you really need to go after too aggressively. You occasionally have some animals where they get excessively high numbers, but most of the time, I honestly don't treat it. And the biggest thing is that they're not lethargic, they're not off feed, they don't have labored breathing with it. It's just a snotty, gross nose with a lot of sneezing. And then they also don't have a fever. So a little bit of a different, but they can look similar from a distance. And so up in that corner, we have the gross pneumonia lungs that have been going on for a while. And then just a picture of a sheep with some, I would say, mild nasal bots. So you can move on. Storm births is what I've started to call them. The storm really stresses out the animals, and so a lot of animals that are due or soon to be due will end up having that cortisol response and then end up giving birth, oftentimes during the storm or shortly thereafter. And the thing with this is that, you know, you really hope these babies are near full term or actually at full term. But because it's so stressful for both mom and baby, you can get some premature births, weak kids, weak lambs, weak calves, weak piglets, and then poor lactation from the moms as well. So you got to be prepared with having some colostrum support in case you need it, preferably some electrolytes on hand for both mom and babies. If you don't have sheep, goat, pigs, electrolytes, things like that, in a pinch, you can definitely do Gatorade. It's just make sure it's the old school one that's got real sugar in it, not fake sugar. And then you want to get these animals, especially the babies, warm and dry. Hypothermia is a thing. So clean, warm, and dry. Just decrease stress as much as possible. I think the biggest takeaway from all of this is if you have weak, brand new babies that were born, especially during a storm or a stressful time period, and they're kind of struggling a bit, do not wait on supportive care. They've got very short windows for how long they can actually survive on their own. And so they a lot of times really do need that supportive care to come in quickly so that they can get up and get moving. I usually tell most people I follow the 1, 2, 3 rule. And that is when an animal is born, especially a four-legged mammal, you want them standing within ruminants, at least. You want them standing within 1 hour, and then preferably nursing by 2 hours, and then the afterbirth should be out by 3 hours. So 1, 2, 3. And if you're not quite in that order, then it might be worth making a phone call just to see if you can get some support out there, or give the baby colostrum yourself and stimulate them, get them up and going. And we can go for the next. All right, parasites, the silent killer. They're not really that silent, but I think a lot of times we're not looking for them, and so they kind of creep up on us. We have all kinds of parasites, nematodes, flatworms, coccidia. Certainly with all of this wet weather and how muddy it is, I would expect that we're probably going to see an uptick in all of these. Coccidia usually causes diarrhea. Flatworms have a variety of signs and symptoms. And then the nematodes, most frequently with the sheep and goats, we're worried about anemia. Cattle get a variety of nematodes as well. They can also have ones that make them anemic. And then the same with the pigs and even the chickens. So just be aware that this might be things that we're looking for with all of it. We have the biggest thing with it is you're looking for ill, thrifty animals, or poor doers is the description. They're just kind of slow, sluggish. They're, you know, acting normal-ish, but not really. Or maybe low weight gain or weight loss with everything. You want to try to, if they're in a confined space, you want to clean the housing daily. Rotate to fresh pasture, ideally, if you can. But again, we just talked about all those silt risks with how much is actually on the grasses and everything. So that might not be a viable option depending on your situation. And then do you need to treat, and you know, how many animals that need to be treated. And then also, if you are having a problem on the farm, it's always best to actually get a fecal, because you might think you're dealing with one parasite, but there might be multiple, or there might not be the one you actually think is the problem. And then all of our animals that gave birth and are having young babies, they are at an even higher risk for parasites. And so we really need to check those guys. These photos here are photos of doing sheep and goat, what we call FAMACHA scoring, and it actually judges the anemia levels of the animals in typically direct relation to the worms. And so you can see what the worms actually look like in the stomach there. And then the lower right hand one is I think it's a sheep that has a haired sheep that has bottle jaw. And that is when they're anemic enough that their protein levels are very low, so they start getting swellings in different places. So those are things to kind of keep an eye out for, and just be aware that pneumonia, foot rot, fly strike, and parasite problems are what I think we're probably going to be expecting in the coming days. And we can go on to the. And I think, yep, I was going to say, I think that's my last slide.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Gabby. And I think Dr. Reichart
Yep.
is up next.
Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about livestock carcass disposal with Dr. Wong from Hawaii Department of Agriculture and Biosecurity. So we were asked to just put together a little bit of information on options available in Hawaii for carcass disposal currently. So we'll talk about just briefly the main ways to dispose of carcasses. We're just going to introduce them. So if you find one that works for your operation, you're going to need to go through and do a little bit of more research on what you can actually do at your facility. So we will be sending out these slides, and on the bottom left-hand side, there is some key resources for you to follow to see what works best for you. A few other quick things is there are emergency declarations currently being made, and that is changing some of the information provided below. So as you are going through and doing some work to figure out what you can do, please be aware of those emergency declarations and how they're changing. So right now what we have available is we have burial, composting, above ground burial, and landfills. Department of Health regulates burial and composting of our animals. And this is going to be because we have to take into a lot of considerations on where we are at elevation and basically how close we are to the water supply. So how close are we to the oceans and wells? So we're going to see a lot of variation based off of premise location. But if you do end up going the burial route, the main thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to make sure that your pit is deep enough and wide enough to accommodate carcasses. And essentially, when you fill it in with the backfill, you want to make sure it's going to prevent carcasses from floating to the surface. The USDA has a pretty good calculator available based on animal species and mass. And that's provided in that first resource there on USDA Carcass Management Guide. And so if you're trying to figure out after you work with the DOH, how big of a plot you need for burial for your animals, that is available there. The other option is composting. This is a little more difficult in the wet environment here, but it is possible, but you're going to want to make sure that you do it on a solid floor, like a concrete pad, and figure out a way to protect it from the environment. So essentially what you're going to do is it's basically a natural process of mixing those carbon sources to absorb fluids and facilitate decomposition. So your pile will have to maintain a correct temperature, and it'll take about 9 months to reach a usable product. And like I said, it's going to need to be located on a solid surface, and that's really to prevent groundwater contamination and to prevent and ways to protect it from environmental stressors. The other option that we have that is kind of a combination of the two is above ground burial. So it's basically, like I said, a hybrid between a deep burial and composting. And so what you do is you'll basically, again, with DOH, you would dig a shallow trench, you place that carbon material on the bottom, you follow it with a layer of carcasses, and then you'll cover the carcasses, and then you'll seed the mound. So this is something you can do if you can't bury super deep. And there is guidelines there for essentially emergency responses for above ground burials. The other option that you have is landfills. So landfills are ran by the counties, so rules are different at each landfill. So you'll have to reach out to each individual landfill to determine if they will accept carcasses, and they generally do. There's typically going to be fees associated with disposing of carcasses in landfills, but again, some of the emergency declarations may have altered that. So be sure to check out what the most recent emergency declaration is regarding carcass disposal. So those are just a few, those are the options here we have to dispose of carcasses. And so if you figure out what works best for you, you can go through and use some of these resources on the bottom to do a little more research on what you'll need to do. Dr. Wong, is there anything else you would like to add to this?
Just going back to the emergency declarations, generally the idea is that those are put into place by, whether it's the governor or the mayors of the county to kind of ease some of the restrictions to make it easier for folks to do the cleanup and the recovery parts of it. But they usually have time limits. So, just keep an eye on the news. The local media is probably your best resource in terms of, paying attention to when those time limits are reached so that, and during that period, hopefully those restrictions are a little bit eased and it's a lot easier to move forward. The other thing I just wanted to add about the composting, it sounds like a great idea. Some of these more complicated processes, they do require folks to be involved. You have to be involved with taking care of that compost pile or even the above burial piles, and keeping an eye to make sure that it is progressing in the manner that you expect. But yes, use those resources. They are excellent in terms from the USDA, because a lot of these problems have been approached on the US mainland when they have to deal with big weather events and or animal mortalities.
Perfect. Thank you. I think that's all we had for carcass disposal, Melly. So
Thank you, Dr. Raycard and Dr. Wong. And I just want to say that we are going to put this presentation into a PDF and share with everybody. So you'll be able to have those links that are on this slide as well. And I think lastly, I apologize for a lot of words on this page, but I did not know how else to get it on one slide so that the resource is there on one slide for everyone. And I believe Kristen Kier is here from FSA, but these are just some of the programs and contact information for the service centers that are out there. Kristen, are you still on?
Hey, Mele, I am. You want me to just quickly go over some of the things
Yeah,
that
if
we
you don't
got going?
mind.
Yeah, no problem, no problem. Thanks for inviting us.
Yeah.
So right now, I think the best case for everybody is, we want to hear from all the ranchers on what kind of losses they're having. So I would encourage, you all to send in, call in our offices. Melly did a good job of putting all our contact information there. Call into our offices. We're looking for damage reports because it really helps us gather data and open up some programs. So, email in photos. We have a lot of producers already, contacting us, and we already got a lot of information, but we're looking for everybody to come contact us. Some of the disaster programs that we have open that are year round for sign up include the Emergency Livestock Assistance Program, or ELAP. And that program there covers honeybees. We pay for hive and colony loss. Aquaculture, we do fish and feed loss. And then for livestock, we would pay for any of your feed loss. So anything that got flooded out, we would pay for that. And then we would pay for a purchase of additional feed. Under our livestock indemnity program, or LIP, we pay for livestock debts per head. Of course, each of our programs, you have to have proof. So, I know some of the other presenters talked about taking pictures and making sure you have your inventory. Those are all really important. So we're going to ask you for those things too. We're working on the Emergency Conservation Program, or ECP. That program there will pay for your infrastructure loss. So say you had fencing and your fencing got washed out by the flood, or, you just had a lot of debris in your pastures because of the flooding, things like that. So we'll pay cost share on that. We are working on the sign up for all 4 counties. We're going to do one sign up for both storms included in one. We're planning to have that sign up start in April. So we're working on that. It's not open yet, but we're taking inquiries. So anybody who has any type of infrastructure loss and or death loss, feed problems, contact our office. We'll be there. I put in, the Emergency Forestry Restoration Program, or EFRP, because a lot of our ranchers also have, forests, right? Or, silvopasture, things like that. So if you had tree loss as well, forest trees, contact our office as well. We have that program. We got to work on that sign up. It's not open yet. And then I did want to put in a plug there too. Kind of weird, but Hawaii County and Maui County are actually already eligible for our livestock forage program, or LFP, for drought conditions that all ranchers suffered in the beginning of the year. So we're going to be beginning that sign up soon. So that there's for the LFP program, I know it seems weird because, we just had a lot of rain. So it seems weird that you'd be signing up for drought, but everybody's eligible on Hawaii Island and Maui County. So we're going to be doing that sign up here shortly in April as well. So it's just additional income for producers. So, I would encourage everybody to contact our offices, and, we're here to help. We feel for everybody, and we want to do our best to get money back into your hands. So give us a call anytime. I can put my contact information in the chat just in case anybody wants to reach out with questions directly to me. I'll put that in the chat. But if not, I encourage you to contact your local FSA county office in your area. And thanks, Mele, for letting me talk real quick.
Yeah, thank you, Kristen. I think we've talked before and shared that, I think sometimes getting in touch, maybe some of the programs might not work for you right now, but having and understanding the documents that you need to have, I think that's the important part, because you need to be able to show some of that, the herd quantities and animal numbers and whatnot. So knowing what forms you need is kind of an important part as well, and those records that we talked about earlier. So I believe there is the last that concluded, I believe, Yoon, the end of our presentation. And I'll also, Kristen, I'll add your contact information when this presentation goes out as well, so people have that. And I'll hand it back over to Yoon.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Melly, and thank you, everyone, the presenters. So, yeah, and kind of like I was saying in the last presentation, it's as important, take care of ourselves and, make sure we're healthy and strong, we have rest, and we have good sleep and good, our basics covered to, care for livestock and for domestic animals as well. So, yeah, a couple announcements. The Agricultural Stewardship of Hawaii is sharing an impact report for your losses. So we're gonna be sharing the link of the information that you can access to it, and also the Department of Agriculture and Biosecurity has a one-time grant for after these flooding situations. We're gonna share those resources as well with all of you. And I think we can just open up for questions that anyone might have. I don't know. Do we have anything on the chat? Let's see. Okay. So I have one direct message says, could the vets please talk about what to do in case of fly striking sheep when the vets are not able to be in timely manner to the farm? What will be the strategy for fly strike? I don't know, Dr. Gabby.
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing is getting that wool and the wet area off of them. If you have a set of clippers, that's obviously the very helpful with that. You just have to clean them really well. If you don't have a set of clippers, throw on a pair of gloves and rip that soiled and wool off of them just to clean them up. It's not comfortable and it will be a little bit rough on their skin, but you got to get it out. And then physically just removing the maggots and everything and off of that. And I usually like to try to do like a couple inches around the area so that you have, a roadway of dry around the wound, and then just getting as much of that off as possible. If you've got the maggots off and then you've just got a wound there, go ahead and scrub it. I usually like to do chlorohex solution and then water to actually scrub that area off, because the maggots have a lot of bacteria and enzymes, can be irritating and continue to break down the skin. So not just getting the maggots and the soil off, but also scrubbing that area afterwards so it's nice and clean. And then usually what I'll do is I'll have that dry out. And I like to use like a wound coat spray on it, Alu Shield or something like that after, or you can just let it air dry. And then trying to identify the source of what caused the fly strike? Was it just the animals were wet from the rain? Are you having diarrhea? Sometimes the egrets like to sit on them and then poop, and that actually will a lot of times create a little area of fly strike because it's just the perfect soilage and dampness for them to cause that. So that's usually what I say. If you can do that in your area, then that's probably what's going to be best. Every once in a while, you do end up needing to give those animals an injection of an antibiotic if they're really, really quite severe with it. But a lot of times, if you're able to physically clear out that area, clean it up nice and good, and if you don't have chlorohex or solutions like that, you can scrub it with, put like a little bit of iodine and I'll do like Dawn dish detergent together, and you can scrub it with that, and then rinse it dry, rinse it with plain water afterwards, clean water, and that's a temporary if you don't have any of the other products, but then the goal is you want them nice and dry.
Thank you, Dr. Gabby. I do want to let Nicole, are you still here? Do you want to share about the Ag Stewardship Survey? I think she's... I'll see if I can find that other link. I don't know if Nicole is still, I can't see.
Yeah, we'll give it some couple minutes, but
Yeah.
there's just a comment here that like sometimes when the animals are grazing in the fruit orchards, you know, the juice of the fruit can drip off the back of the animals and most likely attract flies. So that's also another thing to look for, right? Any other questions? Take advantage that we have all the knowledge and all the bits and the experience right here, all in one place. I don't see any more questions, but if you would like to unmute yourself and comment or have a live question, also feel free to do so. We still have some couple minutes left.
You know,
Hi.
and this is Dr. V from Maui.
Hi, Dr. Aurora.
Hey, I just wanted to raise a potential concern when people look for chlorhexidine and iodine products. There are solution products and there are scrubs that have soap in them. So be very careful, read the labels. I know you guys are going to get tired of hearing me read the labels, but you have to read the labels on everything that you use because it's very easy to get confused with things. And so we have iodine scrub, we have iodine solution, and if you are going to clean a wound, that's fine with a scrub. If you're going to try to disinfect something where it might go in further, you do not want to use the soapy product. So if it says scrub, think of it like it has soap.
Yeah, definitely it's a great observation. There's like different levels of concentration on all these products. We have a couple questions here. What's the best treatment for bottle jaw? That will be one. I don't know, Dr. Gabby, if you would like to answer this one.
It's not necessarily a straightforward of what is the best treatment. There's a lot of facility questions as to how you're managing your animals, not in a negative way, just we need to understand like what you're currently doing. Have you dewormed them? Do you use copper wire boluses? Do you keep track of when you do these things? So it's unfortunately not, if you have an animal that has bottle jaw and you've been deworming it regularly, then I would say let me know, or if you're on Oahu, let me know, and if you're on one of the other islands, have a vet come out and assess, because it's not just it's not just a cut and dry, you have bottle dry, you have to do this one treatment. It's a much more complicated process than all of that. So unfortunately, that's not a straightforward answer.
Yeah, so like from rotational grazing to nutrition to minerals, all of these things gonna play a role into just preventing bottle jaw too, and then having like animals that are more resilient than the others, so genetics, so many different things. What do you do for listeriosis in dogs? That's a question for the vets. So I don't know who would like to take this one.
If you have a dog that is, we don't typically see that in dogs. To be honest, it's much more of a livestock thing. Certainly you can, but if you're having symptoms like that in your dog, you just need to take them to the local veterinarian to have them looked at. It might not be listeriosis. And yeah, so I would say that was something that I would just take them to the vet for.
Yeah. And yeah, going back sorry.
I will just add a little bit on that. Like, if your dog is showing those signs, you should be more concerned about rat lungworm rather than the listeriosis, because that's more common in Hawaii than listeriosis.
I think I wouldn't worry as much about the rat lungworm in with the. I think they're maybe confusing with leptospirosis instead of listeriosis, and we do have a lot of lepto, and that is zoonotic. So,
Yes.
Would you like to elaborate a little more, Dr. Kim Kusuma, into the leptospirosis to give us a quick overview on that? Okay, I guess we can go now. Now we're getting some questions here. I love that. Can I use Lugol's iodine for wounds? I'm not too familiar with Lugol's but I don't know if you are familiar with it. That anyone can just reply to this question. Okay, we have another question.
I think you can use it, Lugol's iodine. It's a different kind of iodine, just with some sodium and potassium. But yeah, you can use it for cleaning of the wound and use as an antiseptic, yes.
Yeah, I would agree with him on that, yeah.
Okay, we have a question. It's like, I have a sheep that is limping. Sometimes it is a thorn. Sometimes I can find a reason. It's possibly hoof rot. Any best treatment? Any recommendations on that on and off limping?
If you're on Oahu, I'd say take down my email and shoot me an email, and I'm happy to come out and take a look at them. Hoof rot does not typically just self-resolve. Every once in a while, if it's a super mild case and you treat it with a topical early on, then it can. But what you're describing, I think might be, since it's ongoing, might be better off to actually have someone come and assess.
sometimes people confuse foot rot with foot scald as well. Where if you look between the toes, even though the hooves look fine, if you look between the toes, it tends to be kind of whitish, maybe smelly, a little bit swollen, pink, sore. I see that a lot in my sheep. I live in Puna and it's wet all the time. And if you look at the toes, you could tell the difference between the two. One is just, it's like wearing a bathing suit all day long that's wet. It's not a happy thing for your skin. Whereas the foot rot is definitely different, and you need to really work with your veterinarian to do a herd health program. And some of those animals you're going to need to wind up culling. But yeah, it's there's a lot of good information. Work with your veterinarian and also the Maryland Small Ruminant page with Dr. Shonian. has Sheep and Goat 101 on the lamenesses, and they have some pretty good discussions on that. It's pretty common.
Thank you. Thank you for this addition. So we have another question also regarding to going back to fly strike and how you identify when it's not visible and they have the winter coat on her sheep and it's before they start before that you see more like signs like separating from the herd or you see like more frantic. So like kind of like starting stage when it's winter coat, how do you identify, prevented, treated, or so?
Kim, I usually see these animals as showing signs that they're itchy in the early stages. I don't know if you, since you own sheep, if you have.
The biggest thing is they'll kind of they just look uncomfortable. They're slow to move. They tend to lay down a lot. But the real key point is check your sheep every day, especially when the weather is like this, because by the time you see something, the lesions tend to be pretty extensive. And a fly strike lesion can be the size of a quarter in the morning and the size of your fist or more by that afternoon. And then they secrete a lot of toxins, and then the sheep become toxic with it. So, knowing this wet weather, just observe your sheep when you're feeding. If you see flies hanging around in the coat, I have hair sheep, but hair sheep can also get fly strike as well. This is the time that I'm looking for it every day when I'm out there. It's real subtle, but they'll usually stand off by themselves. They'll lay down a lot. I notice if they have foot rot, the maggots and the friends like to be in the feet. And when they're sitting down and their legs are folded up, then those maggots sometimes will then jump onto the hair coat and start attacking the sheep that way as well too. And the smell, it has a unique smell, very unique smell. And the hair coat will look raised or wet or something weird. Yeah. But the smell is, yeah. Sorry, did you hear me? Oh, okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
I was, my
very
mute button's
clear.
acting weird. Sorry.
Yeah, that was very, very good. Very so we have another question, I think going back to dogs. So it's like can I booster vaccine for my dog for leptospirosis or what would be the best treatment or prevention for my dog?
Keeping them up to date on vaccines. If they're not up to date on their annual with their regular veterinarian, then I would make an appointment for them so that you can get that taken care of.
I'll add to that. The vaccines are not cross protective against the different strains. And Hawaii has strains I've never even heard of that can also infect animals. Um, and right now, I think there's, again, I've been out of private practice for a while, but there is one company, I think it was Fort Dodge, that put out a 4-way lepto for the more recently emerging lepto strains. But that's a conversation you need to have with your veterinarian. Vaccination and then trying to limit exposure, and then realize that if they do show signs of lepto, again, that's something that you could get. So wear gloves. We would put those dogs in isolation, kind of like we do with the parvo dogs. Here in Hawaii, we tended to see the dogs become kind of yellow or have bloody diarrhea. Whereas when I was on the mainland, it was primarily just straight kidney disease, renal failure. So it presents all different ways.
Wonderful. Thank you,
Okay.
Dr. Kim Kusuma.
Hmm.
An easy one. Best topicals for hoof rot.
So hoof rot, you really only get like a lot of times it ends up in the joint. So you end up not having a long window on that. It's more like the foot scald that you can treat with the topicals. And then when you get to the point where like it's swollen and they're limping, a lot of times at that point you actually need antibiotics for it. I like the zinc sulfate ones. I think the challenges have had a hard time getting them here. in Hawaii. Kim, I don't know if you've had any products that you've had success getting here that you prefer to use, but you do have kind of a limited window on that, and they do tend to go into the joint more than just on the outside of the foot, shall you say. So there's a difference between that scalding and then actual rot. So you kind of have a short window with topicals, but the foot baths are something that you can do to try to prevent it.
Foot trimming as well as environment, having maybe a rock pile for like goats to stand on, or a dry area for your animals to get into, be it with cinder or something else. Foot baths for sure. But once you have it, you need to pull those animals and have an isolation area because it can spread. And if you've gone through dedicated rounds of treatment with foot rot, after, I think in Germany, they're doing a study with antibiotic treatment and trimming and foot baths. If you're unable to clear it after 2 or 3 rounds of treatment, it's best to just call that animal. And
This is Doc.
and
Sorry.
don't bring that disease in. So
Yeah.
again, there are animals that will have that bacteria that are living up in the hoof horn, and even with trimming, sometimes it's hard to get out. So again, most people tend to buy their disease. And foot rot's a little bit different. And then if you're having really resistant problems, it actually might be good to have it cultured, because there's occasionally some other organisms that are involved beyond just the typical 2 or 3 bacteria that have a party together and make things worse. You might have spirochetes or other creepy crawlies that are in there. So a good diagnosis sometime for proper antibiotic treatment or culling.
Hey, it's Dr. V. Yeah, I just wanted to emphasize the rock part. The biggest environmental issue that you have with foot rot is wet feet. So anything that you can do to keep those feet dry, it will help immensely. So grab anything that you can, especially if you have goats. It's very easy. They climb on everything they can. So just keep them up above the muddy soil, and sheep, just make it a little bit of a ramp so that they can go up higher, and that will help immensely. And then you do everything that Dr. Kim said.
Okay, and with that, I think that's all of our questions for today's webinar. I think, again, I just want to acknowledge and appreciate everyone that is attending. I hope that you guys are well. Thank you for all the team. Thank you for all the vets that are present here. We're going to share the slides. We're going to share this recording. All the links that are available for the one-time grant for the Department of Agriculture Biosecurity, the impact survey, and also the livestock CTAR needs assessment survey with all of you. I hope you can make a little bit of time and fill those up. I really definitely, like it was mentioned, we need numbers, we need proof, and we need to see what's needed out there. And that's kind of the only way. We want to hear your voice. So with all that, I think, thank you very much, and have a good evening, everyone. Yeah.
I have a question, Yoon. Do they have a
Yes.
way of sending the surveys to other people too, for people that couldn't make the call and whatnot?
Yeah, we're gonna open a flyer. We're gonna share like publicly and social media, email. So also, yeah, anyone that they needs to have this information. So feel free to share with all your farmers and just producers. So anyone that has livestock or pets as well. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much, and yeah, appreciate it.